The previous video that I recorded was 24 minutes of waffling around the edges because I am a very flawed vessel and I do not want to say something that betrays the cause or that betrays people that are directly suffering at the hands of empire. This video, I want to title it The Treacherous Waters of Anti-Zionism in a Zionist Political Framework. And one of the things that I was saying as part of that is that the main people who advance and defend Zionism are Western evangelical Christians. You know, American Christians are the primary funders, supporters, politically, monetarily, of the State of Israel and of the project of Israel as a way to basically bring about their prophecy of the end times and of the returning of their prophet Jesus. And similarly to how, you know, like the vast amount of support for, like, Zionism comes from Western countries, the vast amount of support for anti-Zionism, in order for anti-Zionism to win out, must also come from Western countries. And we see a problem, I see a problem, many people have observed this, many people have weaponized this in a way to disparage entire groups of people advocating for justice for people that they have not met, is that there are anti-Semites in anti-Zionist spaces. Okay, I've gotten all of that laid out now. I'm going to try to make this video a lot shorter than the first time I recorded this. Okay, so first off, I'm going to do a little bit of a story time about when I was growing up. I was raised as an evangelical Christian. I was raised Southern Baptist and then Methodist by my mother. And I remember in church, they would speak to a great extent about Judea, about the Philistines, about Samaria, about the historical enemies of the Jewish people, about the Jewish people as God's chosen people on God's chosen land, the Holy Land, and the idea that, like, and this is getting into the evangelical and genuinely anti-Semitic territory, that the Jewish people were God's chosen people, and that after the coming of Christ, all of, you know, like, the Jewish people are no longer God's chosen people, and now the Christians are God's chosen people, which is absurd. But I remember, you know, like, they would speak about present conflicts going on in the Levant through the lens of Judea and Samaria, and through the lens of this, like, Old Testament framing. And I remember being very perplexed by this because, you know, I was a kid and I was being indoctrinated into this, but I still had critical thinking. And I remember asking my mother why there had to be war in the Middle East, why there had to be war in Israel. And my mother said, because there has to be. And I said, why can't we allow the Muslim people to observe their religious practices, for the Jewish people to observe their religious practices, and for the Christians to recognize our religious practices in the Holy Land? Why can't we do that? And my mother said, because we can't, because that's not how it works. And I said, why isn't that how it works? And she said, because the Bible says that the Muslim and the Jewish people must always be in conflict with each other. And, like, I didn't even know at the time that, like, the Muslim faith came like 700 years after Christianity and after the writing of the New Testament. Like, this was just complete fabrication from my mother, who was totally brainwashed. But I remember saying, as an 11-year-old, that sounds stupid. And my mom bristled at it. And, you know, like, I was a very uncensored child to a fault, and it would get me into so much trouble. It didn't get me into trouble this time. It was just a disagreement I had with my mother. And explaining, like, where I was coming from as an 11-year-old is, you know, like, I was raised in the post 9/11 just propaganda bath that everyone went through, of, like, Islamophobia, of saying that Arabs are, like, inherently hostile to Western people, to women, to Jewish people, that they're anti-Semites. You know, I'm just now learning the word for this. It's Orientalism. But, you know, the idea that people in the East, that people in the Middle East are, like, savages that we can't treat as, like, negotiating partners or as human beings. And to me, I was thinking, you know, like, Arab people, Muslim people are very different than me, and I'm scared of them because, like I've been raised to be scared of them. And, they have very different cultural values and practices than I do. But at the end of the day, they'd have desires and wants and people that they love and care about. And because of that, they can be negotiated with because they're human beings. And if they can be negotiated with, if they are human beings, then war is inconceivable. That's putting a lot of words on top of it, but that was the general feeling, and that's still the feeling that I have, is that as long as somebody is like a human being and is capable of being reasoned with, then the idea of conflict with that person should be unthinkable, because you should reason it out with them. And this was my idea behind, like different peoples of the book being able to observe their religious practices in the Holy Land, something that should be common sense for all Christians, for all Jewish people, and I believe is for a vast majority of Muslims. And so bringing this into modern stuff, that's important for you to understand. Cutting this into Steve Bannon and talking about Western Christians as supporting Zionism, this is not for the benefit of the Jewish people. Steve Bannon is a Nazi. He's somebody who has supported, ethno-nationalism for white Americans, and is also somebody who is supportive of the state of Israel. And bringing this back into something I was talking about in the previous recording, Israel as a project may have been started by a handful of Zionist Jews, but something that they understood was that the anti-Semitic nations will be our friends. The anti-Semitic people will be our friends because we are going to reason with them to have them send their Jewish populations over here because they have an interest in not having, the Jewish people in their countries. And you see this even today, where Israel has a positive relationship with countries like Poland and countries like Hungary. And their benchmarks for having good diplomatic relations with those countries is not resolving the core problem of anti-Semitism in Eastern Europe and in the former Soviet states. Their criteria for having a good relationship with Hungary is that Hungary allows its Jewish people to leave and go to Israel. And so because of that, because Israel is the Israeli government has this interest in raising the population and increasing the number of Jewish people that are in Israel so that they have a standing army and so that they are able to carry out the project that ultimately is settler colonialism and displacement of the indigenous peoples from their lands. They don't have an incentive to resolve anti-Semitism in the West. They don't have an incentive to make the conditions for Jewish people in the diaspora better. They want the Jewish people to live in Israel. And Steve Bannon was asked 4 or 5 months ago by a reporter what the greatest threat to Israel was, and he said it was anti-Zionist Jews living in America. That should terrify people. My belief is that we are barreling towards a future where some decades from now, it could be as recently as as soon as 10 or 15 years, Jewish people being not just coerced to go to Israel, but being forced to go to Israel. And that is not something that I want to see, because I love my Jewish neighbors here in America, and I want them to be safe here in America. And something that is important with this is that, it's terrifying. It will be a great filtering of Jewish people, because as it stands right now, the right to return for Jewish people to Israel is not equal. Jewish people that have expressed dissent with the conduct of Israel's government are not permitted entrance into Israel. This is why people like Hassan Piker, people that are Jewish, that are anti-Zionist even, are not permitted to go into Israel unless it is, a group like CNN, where they can very heavily monitor and regulate what it is that they are recording, what narrative it is that they're promoting. And if it comes to a future where Jewish people are endangered in America, where Jewish people are threatened by a rising fascism, that anti-Zionist Jews will not be able to flee to have safety in Israel. I think that kind of the core thing when it comes to Israel is that the response to the Holocaust should not be giving the Jewish people a gun and telling them to go and do it to someone else. It should be never again. And we should be making sure that the entirety of our political system and of our political discourse is geared around never again. Because never again doesn't just mean never again for Jewish people. It means never again for everyone. And when we allow for a group of people like the Palestinians to be dehumanized and to be othered and to be depersoned, it creates the framework for that to be done to another group of people. And an epiphany I had a few days ago, my foresight here, and it's very dark, is that the mechanisms that have been used through propaganda, through the media, to dehumanize Palestinians will be directed, and is already being directed, towards the other, towards the stranger, towards the foreigner, to people that are different in countries like America. And that they will come for the immigrants, they will come for the foreigners, they will come for the political dissidents, they will come for the trans people, the gay people, and they will come for the Jewish people at some point along that list, along with the communists and the trade unionists and everybody else that's in the poem. So taking this back to the initial framework of this video, which is the treacherous waters of navigating an anti-Semitic, pro-Zionist framework as an anti-Zionist that cares about Jewish people. We are in a situation where the Nazis do not support us. The fascists do not support anti-Zionists. They think that we're a bunch of commie, bleeding heart liberals that need to be done away with once the Nazis have actual real power. But they are also very interested in advancing anti-Semitism. And so what Nazis, what Christian pagan fascists, what they will do is they will go into anti-Zionist spaces, they will go into anti-Zionist conversations, and they will scamper around at the edges, looking to lure people off from the main group in order to indoctrinate them into a anti-Semitic and anti-human ideology, which is fascism. And then the media, which is liberal, the media that has an interest in continuing the American empire's conduct through Israel in that region, will then use this as a justification to repress the entirety of anti-Zionist thought. And that is the environment that we're in right now, where it is not safe to be an anti-Zionist, it is not safe to be a humanist, it is not safe to advance the framework of materialism. The idea that the politically and economically dispossessed and subjugated people in the world should be empowered and should have more of a say in their lives and should have an ability to have self-determination for themselves. And what we need to do, and this is something that took me a long time to explain in the original video, I've already cut this in half, which I'm proud of. What we need to do is we need to be very militantly opposed to anti-Semites that try to enter into anti-Zionist spaces. And what that doesn't mean is that we paralyze ourselves, prevent ourselves from having important conversations about sensitive issues, and prevent ourselves from doing important material action in order to advance this, in order to go out and talk to people, in order to go out and protest. That's not very safe right now. But what it does mean is that we do need to purge ourselves. We need to clean ourselves of bad actors that try to enter into our space. You should not, if you are somebody who cares about justice, if you're somebody who believes that there should be justice for the Jewish people and that there should be justice for the Palestinians, and that genocide against the Palestinians and genocide against the Yemenis and genocide against people in the global south more broadly must stop, and that there must be a better future for everyone. That does not mean that you spend the majority of your energy infighting within an anti-Zionist space. It means that you are able to navigate through that, and that you are able to call out bad behavior when you see it, and through policing ourselves, through making sure that these spaces are completely hostile, which they largely already are. I want to stress that. because I do not want my words to be used against people who are putting their safety on the line in order to advocate for justice. I sit at home most of the time. Like, we need to be doing that work. And a lot of people already are. But I want the people who watch this video to understand, because there's a lot of people that are in their 40s, 50s, older, that watch this sort of stuff, that have, like an instinctual revulsion to seeing a dead child, which is good, which is human, which is something that everybody should have. And they see that. They see the snippets of this agony and suffering that we are paying for, and they say, I want this to stop. This has to stop. We need to do anything we can to make sure that there is not another mother holding her dead child, that there's not another child whose entire family has been killed and that they are now orphaned. We need to stop this. And I want those people with good hearts to know that there are people who are trying to lead them astray, and that they need to make sure that they are not led astray. And to somebody who's already been led down that path, turn around. Like, it's not going to help you. The idea of a red-brown alliance, the idea of working with people that are anti-Semitic in order to do something to stop the persecution of Arabs, not going to end well. It's not going to get you anywhere. It's going to end up with more dead people. And the other thing is that the Jewish people, not just in Israel, but in America more broadly, need to be able to trust their neighbor and need to be able to trust their fellow human being. And that's something that's very hard for Jewish people. And I understand that because Jewish people have been routinely victimized. But Jewish people need to be able to have the faith that when they lay down the gun, and that when the Israelis stop persecuting and murdering the Palestinians, that the Palestinians are not going to turn around and go and do the exact same thing to the Israelis. The Jewish people need to have faith. They need to have faith in the Palestinians, that they will not take this 80 years of violence and bloodshed directed against them and then immediately go and do it to the Jewish people once they are in a position of power. Liberation for the Palestinian people does not mean subjugation or persecution for the Jewish people. And like, just so much of the stuff around this, like, this isn't going to be a situation where Israel as we conceive of it today, like, falls, and like, there's nothing that we can do and immediately you have 3 million Jewish people be slaughtered. That is not going to happen. America is a superpower, and America funds so much of the functioning of the Israeli government. And we absolutely have power in what goes on in that region. What needs to be happening is that the Palestinian people are given a voice within that society. That the Palestinian people are no longer murdered and that they are restored. And that needs to be the focus, is restoration, stolen land being returned, not the murder of Jewish people or the displacement of Jewish people, but the understanding, hey, like, you didn't know it, you moved into stolen land, or you absolutely enthusiastically knew it and moved into stolen land. You need to give it up. You need to return it to the people to which it belongs. It's going to be very ugly. It's going to be very difficult. I believe that there will be people like in Beitar, people who are in, like, kind of settler militant groups who right now are doing things in America to target people who are opposed to the interests of Zionism. Those people are going to just be doing protracted terrorism. Like, if we try to integrate Israel with the Palestinians, like, those people are going to be causing chaos and havoc for the better part of a decade, maybe more. And that's going to be a part of the process, but it is better for there to be turbulence that is brought to order than for there to be complete one-sided slaughter. Because the Israelis, the Jewish people in Israel, need to learn to live side by side with their neighbors. Because that is the only viable future. There is no other viable future. I think that's pretty much everything that I wanted to talk about, and I did it in a much shorter time this time. I hope you guys have a good rest of your evening. I do this sometimes to the people who are new to the channel. Like, I'll post a video where I do something with music, and then I'll do like a very long and in-depth video about a topic that's on my mind. I hope you guys don't mind it too much. Have a good rest of your day. Be well.